Namaste and welcome to yet another heritage talk in the INTAC lecture series. INTAC, as you might know, was born out of the need to protect India's vast cultural heritage, which goes back several thousand years. And today, it is my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome a scholar, an environmental activist, a food sovereignty advocate, ecofeminist, and anti-globalization author. She has written more than 20 books on related subjects and is often referred to as Gandhi of Grain for her association with the anti-GMO movement. She is, by now you would have guessed, Dr. Vandana Shiva. And Vandana ji's talk today on cultural loss from modern agricultural practices will focus on the interconnectedness between cultural diversity and biodiversity and how the practice of industrial agricultural practices, which is often referred to as modern agriculture, destroys the planet's health, leading to climate issues, floods, and also negatively impacting people's health in terms of rising chronic diseases and communicable diseases. So, Vandana ji, without further ado, it's all yours now.
Thank you, Manisha. It's good to be joining INTAC for its Heritage Talks. I have dedicated myself to defending the biological, intellectual, cultural heritage of India related to agriculture, not because I chose it as my field of study. I've studied quantum theory, but because I watched in 1984 the richness of the culture of Punjab, the land of the five rivers, getting destroyed. If you remember, 1984 was when Operation Blue Star took place, when 30,000 people were killed in that period. I'd done my MSc honors in Punjab and I knew it as a place of peace. But when I was studying why did Punjab explode in 84, it was not a very peaceful place. And so I wanted to study, why did the Green Revolution in Punjab get a Nobel Peace Prize when there is not much peace now? And that's what started my journey on understanding agriculture. And to understand the cultural richness of Punjab, I'd like to share with you the power of that land in Guru Nanak Dev's teaching. The word agriculture, literally, what does it mean? Agri, the land, culture of the land. Agriculture means the culture of the land. That's what it means. It does not mean an imposed culture of some other land with exotic crops. Right now, they're thinking of destroying the Northeast biodiversity heritage of forest to grow palm oil, which has been proven to be a disaster in Indonesia. And palm oil has been proven to be a disaster in food. And here we are, a land with the richest biodiversity of edible oils. You go south, Kerala, land of coconut. That's what the name of the place is. There is no way to separate cultural diversity and biodiversity. The land of coconut creates the culture of coconut. And therefore, everything in Kerala is around the coconut. And I did a major study once, and it was unbelievable how big the economy is. It's not a commodity economy, but how much it provides. The leaves are used for thatch. The trunk is used as canals. The nut, of course, is there for so many things. And the fiber from the nut creates one of the most important economies of our country, the coir economy, a natural fiber economy. We've forgotten how rich our economy is when we stop thinking of the biodiversity economy and we start thinking of the fossil economy. So this is what Guru Nanak Dev has, teaches his followers. Regard your body as a field, your mind the plow, your action the plowing, and effort the irrigation. Agriculture is the metaphor of the Sikh religion. And so don't be surprised that as our agriculture is under assault through new globalization, and if any of you are interested later, we can talk about it. It is the Punjab farmers who protested in 1984, who are still protesting to now. And, so many of them today have white beards. They were young men then. And what they're defending, people must understand, they're defending this culture. They're not defending a commodity. They're not defending a commodity production system. They're defending this faith of theirs. And then he goes on, Guru Nanak Dev, the body is the farm, thy actions the seed. It is watered in the name of God, in whose hand is the whole earth. The mind is the farmer. This is the culture of agriculture of this land. And if you just read the Bhumi Sukta, read the Atharved prayer to the earth. You, Mother Earth, give me everything. Or let me not hurt your vitals. I promise I will take care of you. So agriculture in India, through every teaching, whether it's Sikhism or it's through the ancient Vedas, is about a respectful relationship with the earth, a recognition that the earth is living, and a commitment to not violate. That's why we stood strong for 10,000 years. And when I was doing my study on the Green Revolution and writing my book, The Violence of the Green Revolution, I knew good farming. My mother had chosen to become a farmer after she became a refugee from Pakistan. She was a senior government servant, but she said, no, I've reached I've crossed every glass ceiling. I've done everything. And now I want to be with the land. And she chose to be a farmer. And so I have seen an agriculture pre-chemical age. And when I saw the disaster, I wanted to understand, but there were no books. There was the Vedas. And then I came across the library in the Agriculture Ministry, one old tattered book called the Agricultural Testament, written by Sir Albert Howard. And this is so important to understand our culture of agriculture. Because till then I was thinking maybe something went wrong in the way we implemented this, because the word modern is a brainwashing word, it just makes you think modern has to be better than whatever went before. Modern is given a temporal privilege. And now I realize it is really a word for what I call chrono-colonization. Colonization through time. Evolution happens through choice. Evolution of cultures adopt this from here and look at the paintings of this country, look at the architecture of this country, so much adopted from all over. And even our national anthem, Tagore says, normally we sing the first two stanzas, we forget the rest. Tagore actually says, people came from around the world, from east and west, to this bountiful land. And they merged, and we wove garlands of love. It's a beautiful phrase. We wove garlands of love. That's how we have evolved. That's evolution. Imposition is, this is modern. You'd better do this. And my book, The Green Revolution, shows so clearly that the Green Revolution was totally imposed. For those who want to look at details, please go to it. The World Bank imposed it. The US government called it, basically Kissinger had said, food is a weapon. So it isn't the case that the Green Revolution was chosen by us. And one of the mysteries for me has always been, Lal Bahadur Shastri Ji, our Prime Minister, was saying no to it. He was saying we cannot experiment with such an ancient civilization on such a large scale with chemicals. We want to try it on a small scale. And if it works, we will adopt it. But we can't be forced. And then he had gone on a peace mission to Tashkent and never came back alive. And the pressures continued. And I feel grateful that I had the opportunity to do the study for the United Nations University, because that's what allowed me to understand not just the cultural loss, but also the ecological loss and the misnomer of modern agriculture. There's nothing modern about it. It's crude and primitive. It uses instruments and weapons of war to produce our food. So let me come back to the history. Agriculture, most people think Britain became the empire because of technology. It's so false. The industrial mills of Manchester and Lancashire came 200 years after the colonization of agriculture. Agriculture was colonized first. And the empire, British Empire, was an empire of cotton. So if you want to understand the Deccan riots, they're about cotton. If you want to understand the Champaran Satyagraha of 1917, it's about indigo. It's all about clothing. We were the richest textile culture of the world, the richest textile economy of the world. We were the richest agrarian economy of the world. We were 25% of the world's economy based purely on our heritage of spices and our heritage of textiles. Our heritage was the economy. And it made us rich, 25% of the economy. And here was East India Company that was created to colonize us. And there's a lovely little book by Swami Vivekananda, who actually says that the British turned economy into commerce, into greed. Before that, economy was about life, about heritage, about making beautiful clothing, about growing beautiful spices. Then it became about taking, and just driving down everything. And he talks about limitless greed. And trade then became the driver, not the heritage, undermining the heritage. So Albert Howard was sent into India in 1905 as the imperial botanist to improve the raw material production for the empire, because that's what agriculture was, nothing more than how do you produce raw material. And in those days, the British Empire was basically being supported by Lagan, by the extraction of rents from the peasants whose land had been grabbed. With one pen stroke, the entire land of India became British property. And the peasants of India became basically rent payers. And that's why the Lagan system led to famine. It wasn't that there was lack of food, as even Amartya Sen has written in his book. The Great Bengal famine didn't take place because there was less rice. It took place because too much extraction. Half of the rice people grew used to be extracted as rent, as Lagan. And that's why it's the women of Bengal in 1942. You remember, it's the year of the Quit India movement. But most people have forgotten the other more important movement, the Tebhaga movement. Yeah, because the British used to take half, and the women were saying, take 1/3. You cannot take half, because that's making us down. And their cry was, Jan debo dhan debo na. That was the culture. We will give our lives. We will not give you our eyes. Look at murals of that time. Please go and read about the Tebhaga movement. That's the culture of this land. So Howard is sent in 1905 to basically improve extraction. But he was a very good scientist. And talking about modern agriculture, there was no discipline called agriculture till that time. He used to be called an economic botanist. If you can make botany work for commerce, that's economic botany. Agriculture came much later, and I'll tell you when it came in terms of a discipline, a science. So he's sent to India to create a Pusa Institute in Pusa of Bihar. But he arrives, and he, as a good scientist, he finds the soils are very fertile. And he finds there are lots of insects, but there are no pests damaging the crops. And as a good scientist, he said, I'm going to make the peasant Indian peasant, and the pest my teachers of how to do good farming. And he wrote this book, which is the heritage of India. Yeah. We were practicing good agriculture. We weren't writing about it. Your grandmother who cooked the best food didn't write the recipes. Someone else writes the recipes. Yeah. So Howard's book then became the basis of my realizing, oh my gosh, I'm realizing today that biodiversity is the foundation of any good culture, any good sustainable production system. And Howard recognized that. He says in India, they never grow monocultures. So what is modern agriculture? Monoculture, 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 monoculture. What happened to Punjab? 250 crops were displaced to grow rice in one season, imported from Erie, after stealing our rice. How brilliant our peasants were, how brilliant our tribals were. And I'm grateful to Dr. Risharia, who was the world's top rice scientist and headed the world's top rice institute. It's called the Cuttack Rice Research Institute because the area of Orissa and today's Chhattisgarh are the rice bowl of India. This is where rice is evolved. And Dr. Risharia, who studied in Cambridge, he actually got selected for ICS, for the civil service, but he left and said, I'll be a rice researcher. And he became the director of Rice Research Institute, and he's the one who did all the studies. And when I was starting seed saving in Navdanya, he's the one I called. I said, please teach me, Dr. Risharia, about seeds. And he's the one who taught me, number one, India is a land of diversity. He is the one who counted 200,000 rice varieties, evolved from one grass. So Manisha was mentioning before we started, the painting behind me is the painting of Annapurna, the goddess of food. And the three crops Annapurna has in her hands are sugarcane, and I read a history book where they said Columbus discovered sugarcane to justify the sugarcane plantations of the Caribbean. No, it's the Gangetic Plain where it was a wild plant that got domesticated centuries ago. And Manisha, please have your people look at it. It's a Jain temple today, which still celebrates, and they give the prasad is a little bit of sugarcane juice, because this Jain temple is dedicated to the saint who told people, why are you starving when there's all this amazing food in this grass? So sugarcane was domesticated. And now, of course, if you drive between Delhi and Dehradun, sugarcane, monoculture. And, because Navdanya has led me to such a long journey to help farmers to save seeds, to grow organic food. I said, sugar is one of the biggest killers right now. And all sugar is made in the industrial polluting mills. And if you go past a sugar mill, all you get is a stench, horrible stench. And around sugar mills, the water is polluted. And I've done little informal studies. Around each sugar mill is a cancer cluster. I personally know a lot of young women who have come to us for help getting breast cancer. Punjab, there's a train that leaves. It's called the cancer train. So Annapurna has sugarcane in one hand. She has rice in the other. And she has bananas. So they tried about 3 years ago to genetically engineer the banana. And they said it's to save Indian women from dying in childbirth. And they were going to add genetically in the genetic engineered banana, iron. And I laughed in my mind. I said, you don't eat bananas for iron. You eat greens for iron. You eat turmeric for iron. You eat iron-rich foods for iron. You don't eat a banana for iron. You might have good amount of potassium in it and good amount of other elements in it. And it is one of the most wonderful fruits, and it is the culprit. So we had 1,500 varieties. And if you go to Kerala, even today in the tiniest of shacks, you'll find 20 varieties of banana. So we started the banana campaign, no GMO bananas. And we stopped the genetically engineered banana because it was such a bad idea. And it was, of course, patented. Because GMOs, as my work is shown in my book, Biopiracy, my book Origins, I spent my lifetime on this now. GMOs were only created to patent and to collect ligands of today. If the British collected ligands from land, the agribusiness is collecting ligands from seed, from your knowledge, from the data of your soil, and I'll come to that a little later. So here's Annapurna with sugarcane, with rice, with banana, 1,500 varieties of banana, 200,000 varieties of rice. In Navdanya, we have saved with love and care about 4,000 varieties on the farm at Navdanya, and I hope some of you will come to understand the culture of agriculture of this land. We grow more than 2,000 varieties of crops, and we do not put an external input. There is no chemical on our farm. There's no fossil fuel on our farm. There is lots of diversity on our farm. There are no pests on our farm. And our research, because we also do research, our research is showing that the more the diversity, the more the field produces. We are such an amazing land that mastered the art of diversity. Whether it's languages, or it's clothing, or it's painting, or it's food, or it's cuisines, or it's crops and it's plants, or it's landscapes. Every one of these is a cultural artifact. It's a cultural heritage. I come from the Uttarakhand. Those rice terraces are works of art. Of course, they're works of engineering. And in 1978, when a disaster happened, I got involved in Chipko, and then the women had already said, you cut the trees, you're going to get disasters. You blow up the mountains, you're going to get disasters. Chipko started with one disaster of Alaknanda. Right now, we must have about 1,000 disasters in the Himalaya. Just look at the footage from the Himalaya. And I, as a simple scientist, I say, you want to go faster, then you should go faster, right? Why do you make a 2-lane highway, a 4-lane highway to drive faster? But if in the process you blast the mountains, so that the 3 highways right now, Dehradun to Mussoorie, Rishikesh to Devprayag, Rishikesh to Tehri are all blocked. You can't travel just now. My colleagues were going up, they had to come back. And a bridge in Rani Pokhri collapsed just yesterday. Because we forget that every cultural artifact builds on nature's creation. And that's why it is so important that in Intact, you have a natural heritage cell. And I was very privileged and honored to have been associated with it when Dr. Nalini Jayalji, who's no more with us, and I want to remember him with a lot of fondness, when he was heading it, and before I got too busy dealing with the Monsantos of the world. There was a period of life where things were just easier. So our culture of the land is diversity. Our culture of the land is gratitude. We give back to the earth. Thank you, Mother Earth. Look at all our ceremonies. And Manisha, I would love to evolve a program on the cultural heritage of our festivals, which are festivals of gratitude. They're festivals of amazing gratitude. So we call it the law of return. And, because I'm trained in quantum theory, I realize how pathetic Cartesian thought is, all about linear measurement, line. But the world works in cycles. The water cycle is a water cycle. The nutrition cycle is a nutrition cycle. The world works in interconnectedness. I have a book called Oneness versus 1%. Please read it about what is happening to our beautiful world. So if the world is a cycle, your role in that cycle is to give back. If the earth is living, you don't run the world. She runs the world. You play your little role. And this is the problem of colonialism and mechanistic thought in what's called modern, because it is mechanistic. basically says the earth is dead, soil is empty, seed is empty. We are the power. We make things run. So how do you make, if you say soil is dead, how do you make soil run? You think you will make fertility by putting synthetic fertilizers, the urea, the DAP, and all of the so-called science of so-called modern agriculture is about nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus as external inputs put from the outside. Now, if I have a system that's living, it works in coherence and it works in synergy and it creates from within. If it's a system with external inputs, I can't have diversity. I have to have monocultures because this much nitrogen is only fit for this crop. Whereas when I let the crops work together, then I can grow my beans, my dals with my wheat. We've never grown monoculture. Our wheats, our cereals, oilseeds and pulses have always been the three sisters. They grow together. And the more you intensify, the more the production happens. Navdanya, the very word, means 9 seeds. And I was taught this by a tribal peasant in Tamil Nadu. I do seed collections. But up in our mountains, we have a system called Baranaja. And we now having such heavy rains. But our Baranaja is standing. A monoculture will collapse if it was designed for this much water, but the water is too much. Or if it's a drought, it fails. I mean, over the last 30 years, I've watched monocultures fail with a little drought, a little flood. They cannot deal with variation because they're designed for this input under a lab condition. They have not evolved in nature. So in the external input system, and it's an external system, input system that's destroying the life in the soil because the soil is full of life. In modern agriculture, they declare it as empty. An empty container for pouring nitrogen. The soil is living. Millions and billions of fungi and bacteria and earthworms. I was just doing a count on our farm. You know, in just a square foot, there are about 50 earthworm molds. This is, you know, the earthworm takes the soil and organic matter and turns it into fertilizer, much richer than any fertilizer in the world. It increases just by eating. It creates 5 times more nitrogen. And that's why our soils don't run out of fertility. But with chemicals, they do run out of fertility. And let me just share this with you, because for those of you who think that without chemicals you can't grow food, let me share you some data from the ICAR. And so it used to, you know, a kilogram of fertilizer used to give you 13 kilograms of grain in chemical agriculture in the 70s, soon after the Green Revolution. So 1 kilogram gives you 13 kilograms. And by 2005, 1 kilogram was giving you 3 kilograms. It had dropped from 13 to 3. Why? Because the real source of fertility had been destroyed. When I teach farmers, I take urea and I take an earthworm, sprinkle a little urea, earthworm there. If you've ever trekked in forests, you know, when you have a leech, how do you get the leech off your leg? You put a little salt. Urea is a salt. It's killing the earthworms. It's killing the real agents of killing of soil fertility. And right now, the graph of productivity is looking like this. Because this is not culture of the land. This is war. And, you know, when I did my work in the early stages and I couldn't understand. I said, how can it be that in the same year, 1984, Punjab, the land of the Green Revolution, erupts in violence? 2nd of December, 1984, innocent people sleeping in the city of Bhopal are gassed to death. Where did these chemicals come from? And I started to study. Every chemical of farming has come from Hitler's labs. So they are war chemicals. And therefore I call I don't call it modern agriculture. I would not honor it with that name. I just call it war in the name of agriculture. And let me, again, I'm sure some of you are doubting because so much is told about without industrial farming. So the synthetic fertilizers that are destroying the soil, killing the earthworm, they were made in the same factories that make explosives. The same factories take atmospheric nitrogen, they burn fossil fuels, and they fix atmospheric nitrogen by burning fossil fuels at high temperature. Same system makes the nitrates that make explosives. Same system makes the nitrates that go into making the synthetic urea fertilizer and nitrogen fertilizer. I'll give you just 3 images to draw back in your mind. There was a ship carrying nitric acid that caught fire outside Colombo a few months ago. A year ago, a warehouse where fertilizers were being stored in Beirut exploded. And the damage that one explosion caused was $13 trillion. And because everyone is talking about Afghanistan, what they're not talking about is how did one group of people get so much power? Because it was it was the war between the Soviets and the Americans. The Soviets were in control. The Americans wanted to draw the people away. They created the Bin Ladens. They gave fertilizer and then created these groups. And I've had this from a general. He said, oh, now I understand why so many people are dying of bombing. We gave them the fertilizer because I was telling him, it's the same material that makes bombs, same material makes fertilizer. So why did people die in the city of Bhopal? Pesticides, where did they come from? The gases that were designed to kill people in concentration camps are the ancestors of every pesticide. There is no new science. There's no new science. They just mix a little bit here and change a little bit there. And but Xylon B was a gas they were using, poison gas. Yeah, the same techniques, just a little more complexity, a few more molecules, but gassing people to death in Hitler's camp, gassing people to death in Bhopal, killing insects, killing biodiversity, killing bees is all part of one extermination process. And that's why, being a follower of Gandhi, when I figured out something was wrong with the way Punjab agriculture was being done, I just made a commitment. I didn't know. I mean, what did I know about agriculture? I just said, I'm going to practice nonviolent farming. I didn't know what it would look like because I studied it. I didn't know how to save seeds. I called Dr. Risharia. Because just like all of you in the heritage movement, you teach yourself for the love of your art. You might know nothing about a miniature art school, but you teach yourself. Because you cannot protect something you do not know. And you cannot protect something you do not love. And for me, the protection of the earth is my first love. For me, protection of truth is my first love. And if I stand for anything, it's these 2 things. So let me just share with you some of the destruction, the cultural loss. The soil has been killed. The land of 5 rivers, the land of 5 rivers is today a disaster zone in terms of water issues. It is so serious that NASA has drawn this map that the red zone is where water will run out. That's Punjab. Yeah, the land of 5 rivers. That's a cultural loss because we are a land of water. We are a land of rivers. Soil was the most fertile land, desertified. I talked about the cancer tree. But every chemical and every GMO seed has to be bought. Whereas, the seeds we save give you seed. The basmati we have saved gives rise to a basmati. The cycle is complete. Seed gives seed. Now, the entire greed economy has only one thought. How can we stop nature from working? And how can we stop cultures from working so that the rubbish we have will be the only thing they can depend on? So if you wonder why our beautiful textiles are going, just look at the junk clothing industry. If you wonder why our good foods are going, look at the junk food industry. Because they work out. The other day I was telling someone, I said, there was a Macaulay who came to India and said, oh my God, this country is so rich, we'll never be able to conquer them. So we can only conquer them through education, by brainwashing them. And we should convince them that everything they have is inferior and everything we bring is superior. So they brought aluminium patent. Yeah, they brought rubbish like that. To Amazon, they took beads, So everywhere it was selling rubbish. And that, I think Hermann Hesse called it the glass bead game. It's continuing. The purchase of these external inputs is a debt cycle. It's another thing that's most people don't realize why farmers are on the streets. I was called once to a public hearing. It was on 8th of September, 2006. This is Bathinda. Bathinda is where the BT cotton, the GMO cotton is overtaken. And I drove all the way, 8 hours one way, 8 hours back in. And I'll never forget this. This public hearing, widow of, Punjab is so full of color. I've never seen 2,000 women in white. Because every woman has a different chunni. Every man has a different pagdi. There were no men. This was a public hearing of widows who had died. Gurjeet Singh's husband, Budh Singh, Baljit Kaur's husband, Thel Singh, Karamjit's husband, Bhola Singh, Manjeet Kaur's husband, Sundar Singh, Gurmeet Singh, Gundu Singh, Paramjit's husband, Prithpal, Gurdial Singh's husband, Jarnail Singh. So it goes on and on and on. You know how many farmers we've lost since we, if they're two wrong words, we should give up in our vocabulary. We should never use the word modern. We should use the word our indigenous heritage contemporary and an imposed contemporary and make our choices about what we want. They're both contemporary. If it's about time, it's about the moment. There's a continuity of a heritage. That is this moment. It's very modern. A relevant, evolving, living heritage tradition is modern. It's not the past. It is the future. And in a similar way, another word we have to give up is neoliberal reforms. The word reforms as if we have sinned. We sinned because we had a heritage, and that heritage must be wiped out. How can the word reform, which is an ethical, moral word, come into economics? To impose neoliberal globalization and dismantle all regulation. You know how many farmers we've lost since 95 when WTO was created for globalization and deregulation? 400,000. That's how many of our brothers have gone because of debt. That's a cultural loss, because farmers are the proudest people in the country. Over the years, I used to say, my God, they suffered a flood. They leave, they come back. The Bundelkhandis suffer a drought, come drive rickshaws in the town. And then they go back and farm again. The Biharis travel all over and come back and farm. The resilience, after the cyclones in Orissa and Bengal, I watched communities build back again, and they build back, and they build back, and they build back, and they never give up. I said, how is it that a culture that has so much resilience starts to give up and commit suicide? That is a cultural loss. The loss of pride, the loss of self-reliance, the loss of dignity, the loss of society working on the ground that Annadata Sukhi Bhava, is our culture. Let the provider of food be happy. And we have allowed ourselves to degenerate as a culture in a situation where it doesn't matter. That's a cultural loss. And today, particularly when we are suffering huge chronic diseases, Manisha mentioned this in her introduction, and we're suffering COVID. Let me take an aside and mention, I wrote a piece when the whole corona epidemic started, because it was all a mystery. Nobody knew what was happening. And today there are many, many, many debates about it. But I did a quick look. I said, what are these new epidemics? And you could trace them back to deforestation. You invade the Amazon for GMO soya, which is then dumped on India to destroy our culture of edible oils. You know, 98, I had to do a sarson satyagraha because the women of the slums of Delhi called me up and said, बहुत बोलती हैं आप अन्न स्वराज के बारे में, हमारा संसो बयान हो गया है और हमारे बच्चे सोया का तेल का खाना खा नहीं पा रहे, रो रो के भूखे सो रहे. People don't realize food is culture. You know, a mustard eating person cannot eat soya bean. A coconut eating person cannot eat mustard. I remember long ago when Rajiv Gandhi just became prime minister, and of course Intac owes a lot to him because it didn't exist without his foresight.
First chairperson.
He had gone to Rajasthan, and he was asking, you know, he liked to talk to people directly. And we went into a village and asked this old woman, are you getting food in the ration shops? Are you getting food? And she said, not at all. And of course, he turned around and told the officers, how could you do this? You know, why is there no ration in the shop? And they said, no, the ration's there. The rice and wheat is all there. So then he turned to the women, but the rice and wheat is there. And she turns around and says, since when was rice and wheat food? We are jawar and bajra eating people.
Yes.
So for us to ignore the culture of food or the culture of agriculture is an invitation to both loss of self, loss of identity, loss of health, and loss of sovereignty. Now, I've dedicated my life to the sovereignty of our farmers and our country and the earth, because I am a deep believer that the earth is living. And if the earth is a living organism, then she has rights, like you and I have rights. And my duty is to protect her rights. I've just finished, just before I came to talk to you, I was addressing the European Greens, you know, the European Parliament. And on the whole issue of, you know, here we are having disaster after disaster, fires or floods. Look at the newspapers and the TV. It's fires and floods, nothing else, no other images now. Show me one image that's coming about life flourishing.
And
What?
landslides.
And landslides. Yeah. So why is that happening? Because we just assume nature's dead and we can do what we want to with her. But she's living, and every violation of her right has consequences. Invading into the Amazon has consequences. Invading into the Congo has consequences. Invading into the Indonesian rainforest has consequences. The 300 new disease epidemics that have come, Ebola, HIV, Zika, all of them have come from deforestation. And then there's the invasion into our bodies. You know, our bodies are living systems. Our texts, our heritage says, Annam Brahman. Our heritage says everything is food. And here we are forgetting that heritage. And just like we define soil as an empty container, we are defining our body as a little machine that runs on any fuel you put into it. But that has consequences. So our kids are getting diabetes. India is the capital, epicenter of diabetes, 72 million. Most of the people who died of COVID had comorbidities. Most of them were diabetic. Just look at the data. Just look at the data. So the issue of the cultural loss is today, now, not just that a beautiful fabric disappeared, or a painting, a painter who did the most beautiful miniature is no more. It's about life. It's not about just It's not about a decorative art form. It's about the art of living. That is the heritage we have to keep alive. That's the work I do. That's my service to the earth. And I feel grateful always that these, these were not, they didn't come to me on a platter. There was an outrage of violence. It pained me. I said, why is this happening to Punjab? Why is this happening to Bhopal? Why are farmers committing suicide in Vidarbha? And in Vidarbha, I realized 99% of the seed was GMO BT cotton of consent. Started to save seed. Took 3 years to find old cotton seeds. 3 years. It was not left. Found it in some remote tribal area. Today, we have 100 farmers growing organic cotton from organic seed. And then we work with the Gandhi ashrams on the hand-spun, hand-woven, hand-printed, beautiful, non-violent clothing. We call it the fibers of freedom. So for me, life is about defending the seeds of freedom, defending the foods of freedom, defending the fibers of freedom, which are our heritage. I'm glad I was able to interact with you. Please do not call this nonsense of war modern. It's crude. It's Neolithic. It shouldn't exist. And it's in our hands to make a shift, because all of us eat, don't we? All of us wear clothing, don't we? Every time you put on clothing on your body, every time you put food in your mouth, you're making a choice. Are you defending the heritage or wiping it out? And every time you defend the heritage, you're actually creating better health for yourself. Every time you're wiping out your heritage, you're wiping out your health, your immunity, your resilience. This oneness of the earth, our culture, and our bodies is the oneness that is going to save us. Because we don't have to have conflicts and trade-offs. Or should I save myself or the planet, Baba? That's the kind of discussion students, put up their hand. Oh, but does the earth come first, or do I come first? Well, COVID has taught us. Lockdown, you'd better learn how to live with yourself. Live with less, live with enoughness, be contented. And that is our heritage. Our heritage is to walk lightly on the earth. As Gandhi taught us, the earth has enough for everyone's needs, but not for a few people's greed. With the greed economy, 1 billion people are starving. Half of Indian children are stunted and wasted. We are the hunger center. I mean, look at the data on hunger for this country. Grain is abundant, and the people are dying of hunger because the broken links, food is currency, and we have to make those links again. And that's how we will reclaim our identity, our heritage, our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Vandanaji. I am stunned and I have all kinds of questions in my head. I'm trying my best to organize it and put forth some coherent questions to you, because a lot of what you said is not even in the popular public domain. What you said, it's not, it is unknown. A lot of what you have said, especially about the fertilizers coming from explosives, can be traced. The ancestors of modern fertilizers can be traced to explosives. And the gas that was used in concentration camps is not known. Probably not known, maybe even to a niche audience.
I know that, Manisha, which is why I make the effort to write. And I also have to, yeah.
I mean, I have shivers down my spine when you were saying that, the direct relationship between bombs and explosions and fertilizers. And that's how we are bombing our own land and Mother Earth. So, you spoke of clearly the agricultural systems today, and let's talk of India currently, is overwhelmed with imposed foreign practices, or what other crude modern industrial practices, let's say. So clearly now there is also a gap in people's memories of traditional agriculture practices which were beneficial and which were very in sync with nature, giving and taking. What is the way forward? Will we ever be able to revert to that pristine rhythmic cycle. Because, you know, the whole movement, and especially organic food, when you said people have to make a choice, it is not available. I mean, we as end consumers can make a choice if it is readily available. So, going back to the base, what is the way forward? What is the
Yeah.
actionable plan?
So, when you say it's not available in a context where all that's available is what's destroying the earth and destroying your health, then you have to make that effort to join hands with those who can make it available. And that's the reason I make this effort. I made the effort to save seeds. I made the effort to train farmers. I make the efforts to help farmers have their outlets. And we are now hoping that as people become more aware, and people should write to us at Navdanya, they should write to us at organic@navdanya.net. If they want to learn how to grow food, whether it's in a pot or in a garden, we offer courses I've started a school called the Beej Vidyapeeth, the Earth University, where we teach this not just as a few techniques, but we teach this as a system. How do you build these systems and make it available and be part of it? Now, if what you're saying had to be applied to a painting, old painting, you would basically say, oh my God, it disappeared. But you make the effort to conserve it, don't you? That's what Intact does. That effort to conserve and regenerate is the effort each of us has made. So when I'm saying each of you makes a choice, the choice has to be of making the effort. So another cultural loss of this pseudo-modern is it created the culture of carelessness, both for the farmer who just has to throw urea rather than make the compost, who just has to spray poison rather than grow biodiversity. And yesterday I took photographs going to our farm. We have lovely corn. It's so sweet. It's so sweet that even the ants love it. And of course, the squirrels love it and the parrots love it. Who doesn't love it? It's so tasty. So we get a few cobs left for us. But on the way, I passed a farm which had two-dimensional corn, literally, a corn cob with leaves coming only in two sides, not the other side. And I apply my mind when I observe something that's crazy, because normal corn has leaves in every direction and it has cobs at every height. This abnormal modern corn, I call it, had leaves in only two directions and the cob at one height. Yeah? And I could immediately think, oh my gosh, there's some company has bred this for the West for mechanized harvesting. Whereas our farms are tiny 1 bigger farms and the woman will go and pluck it. She doesn't need two dimensions, because when your big machines move, if you have leaves coming in the way, or if you have your cob at different heights, the machine cannot harvest. So we are changing the world to suit the chemicals and machines rather than protecting the world to do good. So every step we have to take is observation and this culture of carelessness. If Green Revolution was one thing, it was a culture of careless technologies. And it makes carelessness for the farmer, but it also makes carelessness for the consumer, who somehow thinks, "Are supermarket mein le lo." And that's what they're betting on. They're betting on unthinking consumers. Even though the crisis of health is so severe, 72% of the diseases, the chronic diseases that we face today are because of this issue. I was just looking if I can find I found it. Because for people who take it casually, you know how much diabetes we have? Yeah, 7.7 crore people with diabetes in the country. And every diabetic treatment every year, average, is at 96,000. We have 11.5 crore kidney problems. We never had them earlier. Now, think of the number of people who go for dialysis. Transplants are 7 lakhs, dialysis is 20,000 each city. Liver cirrhosis, all because of the food we are eating. 94 lakh cases, 20 lakh treatment. Infertility, part of being alive as a living being is having offspring in the future. 2.7 crore cases of infertility. Oh my gosh, look at the figures. 6 crores per treatment. Birth defects, 70 lakh. Antibiotic resistance. Heart diseases, 790 lakhs. Autism, 20 lakh. Cancer, 13.9 lakh. This is where the money is going with our carelessness. We are making profits for Big Pharma by saying, oh, this is easy. Gandhi has a beautiful phrase in Hind Swaraj. He says, all this civilization brings is a promise to make for bodily comfort. And it is even failing in that, all this carelessness, oh, it's convenient, it's convenient, it's convenient. And yet your body is collapsing. So that's why we have to make the effort and we have to join. Consumers must join hand with farmers. And the reason Navdanya exists is to make that happen.
Vandanaji, we are almost out of time. We've run out of time. And on behalf of Intact, thank you for giving us this very systematic exposition on the interconnectedness between biodiversity and cultural diversity. And I hope all of us can work together to bring back the traditional methods and into the popular consciousness, and so that it reaches a critical mass and is able, we're able to go back to the natural rhythm of the land as used to be. So with that, I take your leave. Thank you very much.
Namaste. Thank you very much, Manish.